Some secrets are buried so deep they don't just threaten your happiness. They can destroy your entire existence. And sometimes the person you trust most is the one carrying a truth so dangerous that love itself becomes a weapon against you. Hello, my beautiful souls. I hope you're having an absolutely incredible day, wherever you're watching from around this amazing world. Please drop a comment and let me know what city or country you're calling home, because I genuinely love connecting with our global family. How are you doing today? Really, I want to know. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, you're missing out on stories that will completely transform how you see love, trust, and the power of truth to either heal or destroy everything you hold dear. Hit that subscribe button right now. These stories will change your life forever. Now let me tell you about Ethan Corleone and the moment when everything he thought he knew about love shattered into a million deadly pieces. The blood on 5-year-old Emma's school uniform wasn't from a playground accident. Ethan Corleone's hands trembled as he knelt beside Sarah McFly in the hospital corridor, watching her daughter's small chest rise and fall under machines that beeped with the rhythm of a life hanging in the balance. The woman he'd fallen impossibly in love with over 6 months of stolen moments and whispered confessions was now cradling secrets that had nearly killed her child. "Sarah, you have to tell me what happened," Ethan said urgently, his billionaire empire feeling suddenly fragile compared to the terror in her brown eyes. Emma didn't just collapse at school. Someone did this to her. But before Sarah could respond, the hospital doors exploded open with the force of a man who owned whatever room he entered. Tall, dangerous, carrying himself with the casual authority of someone accustomed to violence and control, and wearing a face that made Emma's parentage suddenly, terrifyingly clear. "Hello, Sarah," the man said, his voice carrying an accent that spoke of money and power built on foundations Ethan didn't want to imagine. "It's time we discussed our daughter's future." Ethan felt reality tilt as he looked between the stranger and Emma, seeing familial resemblances that had been hidden behind a child's innocent features until this moment of crisis made them impossible to ignore. The amber eyes, the strong jawline, the way Emma unconsciously mimicked certain gestures that Ethan had attributed to Sarah but now realized belonged to someone else entirely. "Victor," Sarah whispered, her voice carrying 18 months of suppressed terror. "You promised you'd stay away." "Promises change when circumstances require new arrangements," Victor replied, his gaze moving to Ethan with the calculating assessment of a predator evaluating prey. "Mr. Corleone, I believe we need to discuss your relationship with my family." Ethan stepped between Victor and Sarah, every instinct screaming that this man represented danger that went far beyond simple custody disputes. "Sarah, who is this?" "Emma's father," Sarah said quietly, her words carrying weight that made the hospital corridor feel suddenly airless. "And the reason we've been hiding for the past 2 years." Victor's smile was cold as winter, and when he spoke, his words carried implications that made Ethan's blood run ice cold. "Sarah, darling, have you told your billionaire boyfriend about the $20 million you stole from my organization? Or should I explain why Emma's accident today was actually a warning about what happens to people who think they can disappear with my money?" The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. Sarah, the woman who worked in his company's accounting department, who'd won his heart with her quiet strength and devotion to her daughter, was apparently a thief who'd stolen millions from what sounded suspiciously like a criminal organization. The seizure Emma had at school, Ethan realized, understanding crashing over him like ice water. "You poisoned your own daughter?" "I provided motivation for cooperation," Victor corrected with chilling calm. "Emma will be fine, assuming her mother makes reasonable choices about returning what belongs to me." Sarah's face went white as she understood the scope of the trap closing around them. "Victor, please. She's just a child. She doesn't deserve. She deserves to grow up with both her parents, in the lifestyle my money can provide," Victor interrupted. "But that requires certain adjustments to your current living arrangements." Ethan felt rage building in his chest like molten steel, but beneath the anger was a more complex emotion. The terrible understanding that everything he'd believed about the woman he loved had been built on lies that might destroy them all. "Sarah," he said quietly, his voice carrying 6 months of accumulated trust and growing love. "Is it true? Did you steal money from him?" Sarah met his eyes directly, and what Ethan saw there wasn't guilt or shame, but something that looked disturbingly like relief at finally being able to tell the truth. "Yes," she said simply. "I stole $20 million from Victor Kozlov's money laundering operation. And I'd do it again to protect Emma from the life he wanted for her." The hospital corridor fell silent, except for the distant sound of machines keeping Emma alive and Victor's soft laughter that carried no warmth whatsoever. "How touching," Victor said. "Sarah has finally found someone worth telling the truth to." "Unfortunately, Mr. Corleone, the truth she's told you is only the beginning of what you need to know about the woman you've been falling in love with." He pulled out a tablet that displayed financial records, surveillance photographs, and documents that made Ethan's world tilt on its axis. "Sarah McFly isn't just a thief, Mr. Corleone. She's a federal informant who's been gathering evidence against my organization for 3 years. The money she stole? It was payment for testimony that could destroy everything I've built." Ethan stared at Sarah, seeing layers of deception that went far deeper than simple theft or even criminal association. "Your FBI?" "Was FBI," Victor corrected before Sarah could respond. "Until she decided that protecting her daughter was more important than protecting her country's interests in my prosecution." The weight of federal conspiracy and international crime settled over the hospital corridor like a suffocating blanket. Ethan realized he wasn't just dealing with a custody dispute or even criminal theft. He was caught in the middle of something that involved organized crime, federal law enforcement, and a woman whose love might be the most dangerous thing he'd ever trusted. "Sarah," Ethan said, his voice barely steady, "what haven't you told me?" Before Sarah could answer, Victor's phone buzzed with a message that made his expression shift from cold amusement to something much more dangerous. "It appears we have company," Victor announced, showing them a text that made Sarah's face go white with terror. "Federal agents 3 minutes out. Time to move." The hospital's emergency alarms began blaring as tactical teams moved through the building with coordinated precision, and Ethan realized that Emma's poisoning had been more than just a warning. It had been bait to draw Sarah into the open where federal agents could finally capture the witness who disappeared with evidence that could bring down an international criminal organization. "Sarah," Victor said urgently, all pretense of calm control abandoned. "If they take you into custody, Emma dies. The antidote to what I gave her requires administration every 12 hours, and I'm the only one who knows the formula." Ethan felt the walls closing in as he understood the scope of Victor's manipulation. This wasn't just about stolen money or federal testimony. It was about using a child's life as leverage in a war between criminals and law enforcement that had been building for years. "Choose quickly, darling," Victor continued, his voice carrying deadly urgency as the sound of tactical boots echoed through hospital corridors. "Come with me now and Emma lives. Stay here and cooperate with federal agents, and watch our daughter die while you're in protective custody." Sarah looked at Ethan with eyes that carried everything she'd never been able to tell him about who she really was, what she'd done, and why loving him had been the most dangerous choice she'd ever made. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm sorry for everything I should have told you. But I need you to know what we had, the way I feel about you. That was never a lie." The hospital doors burst open as federal agents flooded the corridor, weapons drawn, shouting commands that made it clear they weren't here for a simple arrest. They were here for a federal witness whose testimony could topple governments and destroy criminal empires spanning multiple continents. And Ethan Corleone, billionaire businessman who'd thought his biggest risk was falling in love with an employee, suddenly found himself caught between the woman he loved and forces that would kill them all to protect secrets worth more than his entire fortune. But as federal agents surrounded them and Victor's hand moved toward something that definitely wasn't a phone, Ethan realized the most dangerous revelation was yet to come. Because Sarah McFly wasn't just a federal informant who'd stolen money from a criminal organization. She was the key witness in a case that would expose corruption reaching into the highest levels of government, and everyone in this hospital corridor was willing to kill to either protect that testimony or ensure it never reached trial. The tactical team that burst through the hospital doors moved with precision that spoke of federal training, but their weapons were aimed at Sarah with the intensity of people who saw her as far more than a simple witness. "Sarah Chun," the team leader announced, using a name that made Ethan's blood run cold. "You're under arrest for theft of federal evidence, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to aid international money laundering operations." Ethan stared at the woman he'd been falling in love with for 6 months, realizing he didn't even know her real name. Sarah McFly was apparently an alias, and Sarah Chun was someone whose crimes extended far beyond stealing money from Victor's organization. "Agent Rodriguez," Sarah said quietly, addressing the team leader with familiarity that suggested a complicated history. "I assume you've been tracking Victor's communications. You know he's poisoned Emma." I can't go into federal custody until she's been treated. Agent Rodriguez's expression softened slightly as she looked at the 5-year-old girl hooked to machines that were keeping her alive. Sarah, we've been trying to locate you for 18 months. The testimony you were supposed to provide was compromised when Victor discovered I was feeding information to the FBI, Sarah interrupted. Agent Rodriguez, my cover was blown before I could gather the evidence you needed. Staying in the operation would have gotten Emma and me killed. Victor stepped forward with the casual confidence of someone who owned dangerous situations. Agent Rodriguez, how refreshing to see you again. Though I must say, your timing could be more convenient. Victor Kozlov, Agent Rodriguez replied, her weapon trained on the man who represented one of the FBI's most wanted international criminals. You're under arrest for money laundering, arms trafficking, and approximately 47 other federal charges we'll discuss during your arraignment. Victor's laugh was genuinely amused. Agent Rodriguez, arresting me would be quite foolish, considering I'm the only person who knows how to counteract the compound currently killing my daughter. The standoff that followed was filled with impossible choices and deadly calculations. Federal agents needed Victor alive to testify against his own organization, but they also needed Sarah's testimony to prosecute corruption that reached into the highest levels of government. Meanwhile, Emma was dying from poison that only her father could cure. What do you want? Ethan demanded, stepping into negotiations that could determine whether the people he cared about lived or died. Victor, what's your endgame here? Victor studied Ethan with interest that suggested the billionaire was more than just an innocent bystander caught in circumstances beyond his understanding. Mr. Corleone, are you familiar with Corleone Industries' shipping contracts with Eastern European import companies? Victor asked, pulling out documents that made Ethan's stomach drop. Ethan stared at financial records that showed his company's legitimate shipping operations being used to transport illegal goods across international borders. That's impossible. Corleone Industries doesn't do business with criminal organizations. Corleone Industries does business with shell companies that front for criminal organizations, Victor corrected, showing invoices and shipping manifests that documented months of unknowing cooperation. Your legitimate business has been providing perfect cover for my money laundering operations. The revelation hit Ethan like ice water. His inherited empire, built by 3 generations of his family, had been unknowingly facilitating international crime for over a year. Sarah knew, Victor continued, his voice carrying implications that made Ethan feel manipulated and betrayed. Her position in your accounting department gave her access to the financial records that documented your company's inadvertent cooperation with my operations. Ethan turned to Sarah, seeing his own confusion and growing anger reflected in her expression. You've been investigating my company? I've been trying to protect your company, Sarah replied desperately. Ethan, when I discovered that Victor was using Corleone Industries to launder money, I tried to document the transactions so the FBI could shut down his operation without implicating your business in criminal charges. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward with files that revealed the scope of federal investigation that had been surrounding Ethan without his knowledge. Mr. Corleone, your company has been under FBI observation for 14 months, she announced. We've been building a case against international money laundering networks that use legitimate businesses as fronts for criminal operations. And Sarah's role? Ethan demanded, feeling like every relationship in his life had been built on lies and federal manipulation. Sarah Chun was our undercover asset, positioned in your accounting department to document financial crimes while protecting your company from prosecution, Agent Rodriguez explained. Her mission was to gather enough evidence to prosecute Victor's network without implicating Corleone Industries in charges that could destroy your business. Ethan felt the weight of federal investigation and criminal conspiracy crushing down on him. His company was being used by criminals, his employee was an undercover federal agent, and the woman he loved had been lying about her identity for their entire relationship. But something changed, Victor said, his voice carrying dark amusement at the complexity of betrayals and counter-betrayals. Sarah stopped reporting to her FBI handlers. She disappeared from federal protection. And she stole $20 million that was supposed to serve as evidence in my prosecution. Sarah's composure finally cracked as she looked between federal agents who'd abandoned her and the criminal who'd threatened her daughter's life. I stopped cooperating when I realized the FBI was more interested in building their case than protecting Emma from retaliation. What kind of retaliation? Ethan asked, though he dreaded the answer. Sarah pulled up her sleeve to reveal scars that spoke of violence beyond anything Ethan had imagined. Victor discovered I was feeding information to federal agents. He made it clear that Emma would pay the price for my cooperation unless I found a way to satisfy both the FBI's need for evidence and his need for the money I'd documented. The hospital corridor fell silent as everyone processed the impossible position Sarah had been trapped in. Cooperate with federal agents and watch her daughter die, or steal evidence money and become a fugitive from both sides of a war she'd never chosen to fight. So you took the $20 million, Ethan realized, thinking you could disappear with Emma and start over somewhere Victor couldn't find you. I took the $20 million because it was the only leverage I had to keep Emma safe while the FBI built their case, Sarah corrected. I planned to return the money once Victor was in federal custody and Emma was protected by witness relocation services. But Victor escaped federal surveillance, Agent Rodriguez added grimly, and he's been hunting you for 18 months while building new criminal networks that use your theft as evidence that the FBI can't protect federal witnesses. Victor's smile was cold with satisfaction. Sarah's betrayal of federal protection has been quite useful for recruitment purposes. Nothing encourages cooperation with my organization like demonstrating that American law enforcement abandons people who trust them. Before anyone could respond, Emma's medical monitors began alarms that indicated her condition was deteriorating rapidly. The antidote, Sarah said desperately, moving toward Victor with the desperation of a mother watching her child die. Victor, please. Whatever you want from me, whatever deal you need to make, just save her. Victor pulled out a small vial that contained liquid that could either cure Emma or kill her, depending on his mood and strategic calculations. The antidote requires very precise administration, Victor said clinically. Too little, and the poison continues its work. Too much, and the cure becomes more toxic than the original compound. He held the vial where everyone could see it, but close enough to his body that federal agents couldn't risk taking a shot without potentially destroying Emma's only chance for survival. Here are my terms, Victor announced. Sarah returns the $20 million and provides complete testimony about FBI operations against international money laundering networks. Agent Rodriguez ensures that my cooperation in Emma's treatment results in reduced charges and protective custody arrangements. And me? Ethan demanded. What's my role in this negotiation? Victor's expression grew more complex as he studied Ethan with interest that suggested the billionaire was more important to his plans than anyone had realized. Mr. Corleone, you're going to help me transform Corleone Industries from an unwitting accomplice to money laundering into a willing partner in international business arrangements that operate outside traditional legal frameworks. The proposal hit Ethan like a physical blow. Victor wasn't just asking for money or federal testimony. He was asking Ethan to turn his family's legitimate business empire into a criminal organization. Never, Ethan said immediately. I'll never help you turn my company into a tool for crime. Even if refusing means Emma dies while you maintain your moral integrity? Victor asked with chilling calm. The choice was impossible and clear. Save a child's life by becoming complicit in international crime, or maintain his principles while watching an innocent girl die because of adult conflicts she'd never chosen to be part of. But as medical alarms indicated Emma's condition was becoming critical, as federal agents calculated whether they could risk taking Victor down while he held the antidote, as Sarah watched her daughter slip closer to death, Ethan made a decision that would either save them all or damn them beyond redemption. I'll make you a counteroffer, Ethan said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. Give Emma the antidote, and I'll give you something more valuable than money or federal testimony. Victor raised an eyebrow with interest. What could you possibly offer that's worth more than $20 million in evidence that could destroy FBI operations? Ethan's smile was sharp as broken glass. I'll give you access to shipping networks that span 47 countries, financial systems that can move money without federal oversight, and business relationships that can legitimize any operation you want to run. Sarah stared at him in horror. Ethan, you can't. I can and I will, Ethan interrupted, his voice carrying absolute conviction. But only if Emma gets the antidote first, and only if you agree to terms that protect everyone in this room from retaliation. Victor studied Ethan's face, seeing something there that suggested the billionaire understood exactly what kind of deal he was proposing. Mr. Corleone, are you prepared to become a criminal to save people you've known for less than a year? Ethan looked at Sarah, seeing not just the federal agent who'd been lying to him or the thief who'd stolen millions, but the woman who'd made him believe in love again despite every reason to remain guarded and alone. Victor, I'm prepared to become whatever I need to become to protect the people I love. As Emma's condition continued deteriorating, as federal agents prepared for negotiations that could either bring down an international criminal network or create a new one, Ethan realized his offer hadn't been about sacrifice. It had been about strategy, and Viktor Kozlov was about to discover that billionaires didn't get wealthy by making deals they couldn't win. Victor's hand moved toward the antidote with deliberate slowness, but before he could administer it to Emma, the hospital's emergency lighting failed, and the corridor plunged into darkness broken only by red emergency beacons that made everyone look like shadows in hell. "Backup power failure," Agent Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying professional calm despite circumstances that had just become exponentially more dangerous. "Someone's cutting our communications and surveillance capabilities." But the voice that came through the darkness belonged to neither federal agents nor Victor's organization. It carried authority that made everyone in the corridor freeze with recognition. "Viktor Kozlov, Sarah Chun, Agent Rodriguez," the voice announced with clinical precision. "You're all operating under incomplete information about Mr. Corleone's business empire and its relationship to international money laundering networks." Emergency lighting flickered back online to reveal a woman in her 60s wearing an expensive suit and carrying herself with the casual authority of someone who controlled conversations and outcomes through pure force of will. "Director Katharine Hepburn," Agent Rodriguez said, her voice carrying surprise and something that might have been fear. "I wasn't aware the CIA was involved in this operation." Ethan stared at the woman who'd just identified herself as CIA, feeling his understanding of the situation shifting in ways that made everything more complex and dangerous. "The CIA becomes involved when FBI operations threaten national security interests that extend beyond simple criminal prosecution," Director Hepburn replied, her attention focusing on Ethan with interest that suggested he was more important to international intelligence than anyone had realized. "Mr. Corleone," Director Hepburn continued, "are you familiar with your grandfather's business relationships during World War II?" The question hit Ethan like ice water. His grandfather had died when Ethan was 10, leaving behind stories of wartime heroism and business success that had shaped the family legacy for 3 generations. "My grandfather helped supply Allied forces during the war," Ethan replied warily. "Corleone Industries was founded on government contracts for military logistics." Corleone Industries was founded on intelligence operations that required legitimate business cover for activities that couldn't be officially acknowledged, Director Hepburn corrected, showing documents that made Ethan's world tilt on its axis. The files revealed that his grandfather hadn't just been a businessman who'd prospered during wartime. He'd been a CIA asset who'd used Corleone Industries to facilitate intelligence operations across Europe, Asia, and eventually the entire world. "For 75 years, Corleone Industries has served dual purposes," Director Hepburn explained. "Legitimate international business and cover for intelligence operations that require private sector cooperation." Victor's expression shifted from confident control to something approaching alarm as he realized the scope of what he'd been attempting to manipulate. "You're saying Corleone Industries is a CIA front operation?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying shock at discovering another layer of deception in her relationship with Ethan. "I'm saying Corleone Industries is a hybrid organization that serves both private business interests and national security objectives," Director Hepburn replied. "Mr. Corleone, your offer to Victor wasn't about turning your company criminal. It was about activating intelligence protocols that have been dormant for 20 years. Ethan felt understanding crash over him as pieces of his family history clicked into place with terrifying clarity. The secure communications systems he'd thought were standard business equipment. The shipping contracts that seemed unusually complex for simple international trade. The financial networks that operated with efficiency that went beyond normal corporate capabilities. I've been running a CIA operation my entire adult life without knowing it, Ethan realized. You've been prepared to run a CIA operation since your 18th birthday, Director Hepburn confirmed. Your education, your business training, your personal development, all of it designed to ensure you could activate these protocols when national security required private sector cooperation. Victor was backing toward the hospital exit, understanding that he'd attempted to blackmail someone whose resources extended far beyond billionaire wealth into territory that could destroy him completely. The $20 million Sarah stole, Victor said slowly, wasn't just evidence money. It was operational funding for intelligence activities. The $20 million Sarah secured was payment for intelligence services that Victor's organization had been unknowingly providing to foreign governments, Director Hepburn corrected. Sarah didn't steal evidence. She recovered classified funding that belonged to American intelligence operations. The revelation hit everyone in the corridor like lightning. Sarah hadn't been a federal informant who'd gone rogue. She'd been a CIA asset protecting classified operations from foreign intelligence services. The FBI investigation, Agent Rodriguez realized, was cover for a CIA operation to identify foreign agents infiltrating American business networks. Agent Rodriguez, your cooperation in maintaining that cover has been noted and appreciated, Director Hepburn replied. But the operation has now reached a phase that requires full intelligence authorization. She pulled out communication equipment that connected her to authorities that outranked everyone in the hospital corridor. Control, this is Director Hepburn. Authorization Omega-7 is now active. Repeat, Omega-7 is active. Ethan felt reality reshaping itself around intelligence operations that had been running his entire life without his knowledge. His company, his wealth, his business relationships, all of it had been designed to serve national security objectives he'd never suspected existed. The antidote, Sarah said urgently, refocusing everyone's attention on Emma's deteriorating condition. Victor, Director Hepburn, whoever's really in control here. Emma is dying while you discuss intelligence operations. Victor pulled out the vial that could save Emma's life, but his hand was shaking with the understanding that administering the antidote would either complete his negotiation or trigger his elimination by intelligence services that operated beyond legal oversight. Mr. Corleone, Victor said carefully, what exactly happens to me if I cooperate with CIA operations? That depends on whether you're willing to provide intelligence about foreign governments that have been using your money laundering networks to fund operations against American interests, Director Hepburn replied. She showed them files that documented connections between Victor's criminal organization and foreign intelligence services that had been using international money laundering as cover for espionage activities. Your business empire hasn't just been facilitating crime, Director Hepburn told Victor. It's been facilitating foreign intelligence operations designed to destabilize American economic and political systems. Victor stared at evidence that his criminal organization had been manipulated by foreign governments into serving strategic objectives that went far beyond simple money laundering. Who? Victor demanded. Which governments have been using my operations? The governments you'll help us identify and prosecute in exchange for reduced charges and protective custody for you and your daughter, Director Hepburn replied. The offer was seductive and terrifying. Cooperation with American intelligence services in exchange for protection from foreign governments that had been using him without his knowledge. But as Victor considered the choice between CIA cooperation and foreign intelligence retaliation, Emma's medical monitors began the continuous tone that indicated cardiac arrest. She's dying, Sarah screamed, rushing toward her daughter as medical personnel flooded the corridor with emergency equipment. Victor looked at the antidote in his hand, then at Emma fighting for her life, then at the intelligence officers and federal agents and criminal organizations that had made his daughter a pawn in games she'd never chosen to play. To hell with all of you, Victor said quietly, moving toward Emma with the antidote that could save her life. Some things are more important than intelligence operations. But as he approached Emma's bedside, as medical personnel prepared to administer whatever treatment he provided, Director Hepburn's next words stopped everyone cold. Mr. Kozlov, the compound you gave Emma wasn't poison. It was an experimental medication designed to trigger symptoms that would draw all relevant parties to this location where they could be contained and debriefed. The silence that followed was deafening. You're saying Emma was never in real danger? Ethan demanded. I'm saying Emma was given a medication that mimics life-threatening symptoms while providing complete protection from actual harm, Director Hepburn confirmed. The entire medical emergency was designed to create circumstances where intelligence operations could be conducted under controlled conditions. Victor stared at the antidote in his hand, understanding that his daughter had never been dying, that the medical crisis had been manufactured to manipulate everyone's choices and allegiances. You used my daughter as bait, Victor said, his voice carrying rage that went beyond personal betrayal into parental fury. You made me believe I was killing my own child. We made you believe you had power over life and death, so you would reveal your true priorities when forced to choose between criminal objectives and parental love. Director Hepburn replied clinically. Sarah was staring at Emma, who was already beginning to show signs of recovery as the manufactured symptoms subsided. She's going to be fine? She's going to be perfectly healthy, Director Hepburn confirmed. And all of you are going to help us complete intelligence operations that will prevent foreign governments from using American business networks to fund activities that threaten national security. But as relief flooded through the corridor, as Emma's condition stabilized, as everyone processed the scope of manipulation and deception that had brought them together, Ethan realized the most important revelation was yet to come. Because Sarah Chin wasn't just a CIA asset who'd been protecting classified operations. She was the daughter of foreign intelligence officers, and her entire life had been designed to infiltrate American intelligence services from the inside. The woman he'd fallen in love with wasn't just lying about her identity. She was lying about which country she was really serving. The CIA safe house in Langley felt like a cross between a luxury hotel and a maximum security prison. But Ethan's focus wasn't on the surveillance equipment disguised as artwork or the federal agents positioned at every exit. It was on watching Sarah hold Emma, while both of them processed the revelation that their entire life together had been an intelligence operation. The medication is completely out of her system, Dr. Kevin Grant reported, checking Emma's vitals with equipment that looked far more sophisticated than standard medical devices. No long-term effects, no complications, and no memory of the symptoms that brought us all together. Emma was playing with toys that probably contained recording devices, blissfully unaware that her collapse at school had triggered international intelligence operations involving 3 governments and criminal organizations spanning multiple continents. How long? Ethan asked Director Hepburn, who was reviewing files that would determine whether they were witnesses, assets, or prisoners in whatever came next. How long have you been planning this operation? 43 months, Director Hepburn replied, showing him operational timelines that documented surveillance, manipulation, and strategic positioning that had shaped his entire relationship with Sarah. Since we identified foreign intelligence infiltration of American business networks and determined that Corleone Industries' dual-purpose infrastructure made it ideal for counterintelligence operations. Ethan felt sick as he understood the scope of how his life had been manipulated. Sarah's position in my company wasn't coincidental. Sarah Chun was placed in your accounting department to monitor financial transactions while building the personal relationship necessary for you to activate your family's intelligence protocols, Director Hepburn confirmed. Sarah was sitting across the room, avoiding eye contact while helping Emma color pictures that would probably be analyzed for psychological indicators. But Ethan could see tension in her posture that suggested she was preparing to reveal information that would either complete the operation or destroy everyone involved. There's something you need to know, Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of secrets that had been building for months of stolen moments and whispered confessions. About my assignment, about Emma's father, about why I really left federal protection. Victor, who was reviewing cooperation agreements that would either reduce his charges or make him a permanent target for foreign retaliation, looked up with interest that suggested Sarah's revelation would affect him as much as anyone. Sarah, Director Hepburn warned, any information that compromises ongoing operations. My name isn't Sarah Chun, Sarah interrupted, her voice steady despite the emotional devastation of what she was about to confess. My name is Ling Wei, and I'm a Chinese intelligence officer who's been conducting a deep cover operation against American intelligence services for 4 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan felt his understanding of everything, their relationship, her motivations, even her love for Emma, crumble into something unrecognizable. Your Chinese intelligence, Ethan said, his voice barely steady. Everything about us, everything I thought we felt for each other, was real, Sarah said desperately. Ethan, the assignment was real, but what happened between us was never part of any operation. I fell in love with you despite my mission, not because of it. Victor was staring at Sarah with something approaching admiration. Ling Wei, I should have recognized the operational sophistication. Chinese intelligence doesn't just infiltrate, they create entire lives that become indistinguishable from reality. Director Hepburn was already activating communication protocols that would alert American intelligence services to the presence of a foreign agent who'd been operating under deep cover for years. Agent Wei, Director Hepburn said formally, you're under arrest for espionage, conspiracy to commit treason, and violation of approximately 37 federal statutes regarding foreign intelligence operations on American soil. But Sarah, Ling, wasn't finished with revelations that would reshape everyone's understanding of the situation. Director Hepburn, arresting me would be strategically inadvisable, she said with calm professionalism that revealed the intelligence operative beneath the cover identity. Because the information I've gathered about American intelligence operations has already been transmitted to Beijing, and my continued cooperation is the only thing preventing that intelligence from being used against American interests. The weight of international espionage settled over the safe house like a death sentence. Ethan realized he wasn't just caught between criminal organizations and federal investigations. He was trapped in the middle of intelligence warfare between superpowers. What information? Director Hepburn demanded. Ling pulled out devices that had been disguised as everyday electronics. Her phone, her tablet, even jewelry that contained recording equipment sophisticated enough to document conversations and transactions for years. Complete documentation of CIA operations using American businesses as cover for intelligence activities, Ling announced. Financial records of off-books operations, personnel files of undercover assets, operational protocols for activities that violate international law. She gestured toward Ethan with something that looked like regret, including 43 months of intelligence about Corleone Industries' dual-purpose infrastructure and its use for operations that the American public would consider treasonous. Ethan felt rage building in his chest like molten steel. You've been spying on my company, documenting my business operations, gathering evidence that could destroy everything my family built. I've been documenting American intelligence operations that use private businesses to conduct activities that violate international law, Ling corrected. Ethan, Corleone Industries isn't just facilitating legitimate business and occasional intelligence cooperation. It's been used for arms trafficking, political destabilization, and economic warfare disguised as humanitarian aid. Director Hepburn was quiet for a moment before responding. Agent Wei, what exactly are you proposing? Complete intelligence exchange, Ling replied immediately. Chinese intelligence shares information about foreign governments using American business networks for espionage activities. American intelligence shares information about international criminal organizations using Chinese financial systems for money laundering. And in exchange, Viktor Kozlov's organization becomes a joint intelligence asset, providing cover for operations that serve both American and Chinese interests in identifying and prosecuting foreign agents operating in our respective countries. Victor looked up from his cooperation agreements with interest that suggested he'd been expecting this development. Agent Wei, are you proposing that my criminal organization become a legitimate intelligence operation, serving two governments simultaneously? I'm proposing that your criminal organization become a controlled intelligence asset that serves neither government exclusively, but provides mutual benefit through careful operational coordination, Ling replied. Ethan stared between the Chinese intelligence officer he'd fallen in love with, the American CIA director who'd been manipulating his life, and the international criminal who was apparently being recruited as an intelligence asset by both sides. What about me? Ethan demanded. What's my role in this international intelligence cooperation? Ling met his eyes directly, and what Ethan saw there wasn't the calculation of an intelligence operative or the manipulation of a foreign agent, but something that looked disturbingly like love. Your role is whatever you choose it to be, she said quietly. Ethan, I can't lie to you anymore about my mission, my identity, or my government's interests. But I can tell you the truth about what I feel for you and what I want our future to look like. Which is a life where we're partners instead of targets, where Emma grows up safe from intelligence operations and international crime, where what we build together serves our family instead of serving governments that see love as just another tool for manipulation. Director Hepburn stepped forward with documents that would either legitimize their relationship or criminalize it permanently. Mr. Corleone, Agent Wei, Mr. Kozlov, she announced, you have a choice. Become willing participants in joint intelligence operations that protect American interests while serving international cooperation, or become unwilling subjects of prosecution that will destroy your lives while accomplishing nothing constructive for anyone. The choice was impossible and clear. Cooperation with intelligence services that had been manipulating them for years, or prosecution that would separate them permanently while accomplishing nothing positive for the people they were trying to protect. But as Ethan looked at Ling holding Emma, as he watched Victor consider agreements that could transform his criminal empire into a force for international justice. As he processed the revelation that his own company had been serving intelligence objectives for 3 generations, he realized something that changed everything. This wasn't about choosing between governments or intelligence services or criminal organizations. This was about choosing what kind of people they wanted to be when the people they loved depended on their decisions. "I have a counter-proposal," Ethan said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd built a billion-dollar empire and was prepared to transform it into something even more powerful. "Mr. Corleone?" Director Hepburn asked. Ethan looked at Ling with eyes that carried 6 months of accumulated love and the growing certainty that what they'd built together was stronger than any government's ability to manipulate or control. "We become partners," he said simply. "All of us. American intelligence, Chinese intelligence, Victor's organizational expertise, and my business infrastructure. We create something new, an international cooperation network that serves justice instead of serving governments." The silence that followed carried the weight of possibilities that could either transform international relations or start the next world war. But as Emma looked up from her coloring book and asked, "Mama, are we going home soon?" Ethan realized that home wasn't a place. Home was the family they were choosing to build together, regardless of what governments or intelligence services or criminal organizations demanded from them. The explosion that rocked the CIA safe house at exactly 3:17 a.m. wasn't an accident, and it wasn't an attack by foreign intelligence services seeking to eliminate American assets. It was Ethan Corleone activating protocols that had been built into his family's operations for 75 years. Protocols designed to neutralize threats to national security regardless of whether those threats came from foreign governments, domestic criminals, or intelligence agencies that had lost sight of their mission. Lockdown initiated. Came the automated announcement as blast-proof barriers sealed every entrance and exit to the facility. All communications disabled. Emergency protocols activated. Stand by for operational override. Director Hepburn stared at control panels that no longer responded to her authorization codes, understanding that she'd just lost control of a situation she'd thought she was managing. "Mr. Corleone, what have you done?" Director Hepburn demanded, but her voice carried respect rather than alarm. The respect of someone who'd just realized she'd been outmaneuvered by a player she'd underestimated. Ethan helped Emma and Ling move to a secure area while monitoring systems that had transformed the safe house from a CIA facility into something that served his family's objectives rather than government interests. "I've activated the Corleone protocols," Ethan replied, his voice carrying authority that came from understanding his true inheritance for the first time. "Contingency plans my grandfather built into every facility, every system, every relationship that Corleone Industries has maintained for 3/4 of a century." Victor was studying security displays with professional appreciation. "Impressive. Your grandfather designed systems that can override government control of their own facilities. My grandfather designed systems that ensure Corleone family interests are protected regardless of what governments, intelligence services, or criminal organizations demand," Ethan confirmed. He activated communication equipment that connected him not to CIA headquarters or FBI operations centers, but to private networks that had been operating independently of government oversight since World War II. "Control, this is Ethan Corleone. Authorization Grandfather 7. Initiate full independence protocols for all family assets worldwide." The response came immediately. Authorization confirmed. Independence protocols active across 47 countries. All government contracts suspended. All intelligence cooperation terminated. All facilities now operating under private family authority. Director Hepburn felt the scope of what was happening crash over her like ice water. "You're severing Corleone Industries' relationship with American intelligence services. Permanently. I'm establishing Corleone Industries as an independent organization that serves family interests rather than government objectives," Ethan corrected. "Director Hepburn, for 75 years, my family has provided resources, infrastructure, and expertise to American intelligence operations. That cooperation ends today." Ling was staring at displays that showed the real scope of Corleone Industries' global operations. Not just business networks, but private intelligence services, independent military capabilities, and financial systems that operated outside government control. "Ethan," Ling said quietly, "you're not just a billionaire businessman. You're the head of a private intelligence organization that rivals most governments. I'm the heir to an organization that my grandfather built to ensure that good people had resources to fight evil regardless of what governments were willing or able to do, Ethan replied. He showed them operational files that documented decades of private intelligence operations, rescuing hostages when governments couldn't negotiate, stopping human trafficking when law enforcement couldn't prosecute, preventing atrocities when international law couldn't intervene. The Corleone Foundation isn't just a charity organization, Ethan explained. It's cover for humanitarian operations that save lives when official channels fail to act. Victor was reviewing files with growing understanding. Your money laundering investigations, your cooperation with my organization. You weren't trying to prosecute criminals. You were trying to recruit assets for private operations. I was trying to identify people with the skills, connections, and moral flexibility necessary to fight injustice that governments are too constrained to address, Ethan confirmed. Director Hepburn realized the full scope of what she'd lost. Mr. Corleone, terminating your family's cooperation with American intelligence services will cripple operations worldwide. We depend on your infrastructure for activities that official channels can't support. Then you should have treated my family as partners instead of assets to be manipulated, Ethan replied without sympathy. He turned to Ling with an expression that carried everything he'd learned about love, trust, and the courage required to build something together that served principles instead of serving governments. Ling Wei, Ethan said formally, I'm offering you a choice that your government can't rescind and my government can't interfere with. What choice? Ling asked, though her voice suggested she already understood the scope of what he was proposing. Join the Corleone Foundation as an independent operative serving humanitarian objectives rather than nationalist interests. Help me build an organization that protects families like ours from intelligence services that see love as just another tool for manipulation. The offer hung in the air like a bridge between worlds. The possibility of love that transcended national loyalties, intelligence operations, and the manipulations that had brought them together. What about Emma? Ling asked. What about Victor? What about the people whose lives depend on intelligence cooperation between governments? Emma grows up in a family that serves justice instead of serving masters, Ethan replied. Victor transforms his criminal organization into a humanitarian network that protects people instead of exploiting them. And intelligence cooperation continues through private channels that prioritize results over political considerations. Victor stepped forward with interest that suggested he'd been hoping for exactly this opportunity. Mr. Corleone, are you proposing that we create an international network of private intelligence assets serving humanitarian objectives? I'm proposing that we create a family, Ethan said simply. A chosen family of people who've learned that love is stronger than loyalty to governments that don't deserve our service. Before anyone could respond, Ling's communication device activated with a priority transmission from Beijing that would either complete her mission or terminate it permanently. Agent Wei, came the voice of her Chinese handler. Report your operational status immediately. Ling looked at the device that connected her to a government that had shaped her entire adult life. Then at Ethan, who was offering her the chance to choose love over duty for the first time since she'd become an intelligence operative. Control, this is Agent Wei, she said quietly. Agent Wei, provide current intelligence on American operations and prepare for extraction within 12 hours. Ling met Ethan's eyes, seeing not just the man she'd fallen in love with, but the partner who could help her build something that served their family instead of serving governments that saw them as expendable. Control, Ling said with absolute conviction. Agent Wei is terminating operational status effective immediately. Future communications should be directed to the Corleone Foundation for International Justice. The silence that followed was deafening. Agent Wei, you are in violation of standing orders. Return to operational status immediately or face consequences for treason against the People's Republic of China. Control. Ling replied with a smile that carried 18 months of accumulated love and the freedom to finally choose her own path. Agent Wei no longer exists. Ling Chun, private citizen and Corleone Foundation operative, sends her regards. She turned off the communication device and looked at Ethan with eyes that held no more secrets, no more divided loyalties, no more service to anyone except the family they were choosing to build together. Ethan Corleone, she said, I choose you. I choose Emma. I choose building something that serves love instead of serving governments. Ethan pulled her into his arms while Emma cheered and Victor began planning the transformation of his criminal empire into something that would honor the family they were all choosing to become. But as celebrations began, as independence protocols secured their freedom from government manipulation, as love finally triumphed over duty and principle won out over political expedience, none of them noticed the small device that Director Hepburn had activated. A device that was broadcasting their entire conversation to intelligence services worldwide. The Corleone Foundation for International Justice was about to discover that choosing independence from government control meant becoming a target for every intelligence service that depended on the assets they'd just declared autonomous. Their love had survived federal investigations, criminal organizations, and international espionage. Now it would face the ultimate test, protecting each other from intelligence services that would rather destroy them than allow them the freedom to serve justice instead of serving masters. 72 hours later, the safe house in rural Montana felt like a tomb, and Ling Chen knew it was only a matter of time before it became one. Satellite surveillance detected movement 3 miles northeast. Victor reported from monitoring equipment that had been providing increasingly grim updates about the forces converging on their location. Chinese tactical teams estimated 12 operatives with military-grade equipment. Ling adjusted Emma's bulletproof vest with hands that trembled despite 3 years of combat training, watching the 5-year-old color pictures that would probably be her last innocent moments for a very long time. Russian assets approaching from the south, Ethan added, his voice hollow with exhaustion after 3 days of coordinated attacks by intelligence services from 17 countries. British SAS confirmed 2 miles west. And American Black Ops teams have us surrounded on all remaining approaches. The Corleone Foundation for International Justice had lasted exactly 72 hours before becoming the target of the largest coordinated intelligence operation in modern history. Every government that had depended on Corleone Industries' cooperation now wanted them eliminated rather than allow their independence to encourage other assets to break free. "We're not going to survive this," Ling said quietly, stating the reality that everyone had been avoiding. "Emma needs to be extracted before the final assault." "No," Ethan replied immediately. "We stay together. Whatever happens, we face it as a family." But as Victor continued monitoring communications from the intelligence teams closing in on their position, as escape routes were systematically eliminated by forces that had unlimited resources and no legal constraints, Ling realized their love story was about to end in the worst possible way. "There's something I haven't told you," Victor said, his voice carrying news that would either save them or complete their destruction. About Director Hepburn's broadcast. About what intelligence services worldwide actually heard when we declared independence. Ethan looked up from weapons systems that wouldn't be sufficient against the forces surrounding them. "What do you mean?" Victor activated recordings that made everyone's blood run cold. Intercepts of communications between intelligence agencies that revealed the true scope of the threat they represented. Beijing command to Moscow control. Corleone assets must be eliminated before other private networks attempt similar independence operations. London to Washington, coordinated strike authorized. No survivors. Make it appear accidental. Langley to all stations, priority alpha termination. The Corleone precedent cannot be allowed to establish. Ling felt ice flood her veins as she understood what they were really facing. This isn't about punishing us for breaking away. This is about preventing other private assets from realizing they have the option to choose independence. The intelligence community sees us as an existential threat, Ethan realized. If we succeed in operating independently, other assets worldwide might follow our example, which would collapse the entire system of government control over private intelligence networks, Victor confirmed grimly. Before anyone could respond, Emma looked up from her coloring book with the innocent wisdom that sometimes allowed children to see solutions that adults missed. "Why don't we just tell everyone what the bad people are doing?" Emma asked. "When kids do bad things, we tell the teachers so they get in trouble." The silence that followed was filled with recognition that a 5-year-old had just identified the strategy that could save their lives. "Emma's right," Ling said, understanding blooming in her voice. "We're not just targets for elimination. We're witnesses to the coordination between intelligence agencies that the public would never accept." Ethan stared at his communication equipment, seeing possibilities he'd been too focused on survival to recognize. International law prohibits intelligence services from cooperating in assassination operations against civilians. But it's happening anyway, Victor added. And we have documentation of the coordination that proves multiple governments are violating international law. They worked frantically to compile evidence while monitoring the approach of tactical teams that would either eliminate them or provide the final proof they needed of intelligence cooperation that violated every international treaty governing covert operations. Upload complete, Ling announced, transmitting evidence to media outlets, international courts, and oversight committees across 47 countries simultaneously. Communications intercepts, operational coordination, assassination authorizations, everything. The response was immediate and overwhelming. News organizations worldwide began broadcasting evidence of illegal intelligence cooperation. International courts initiated emergency proceedings, and oversight committees demanded immediate explanations from intelligence agencies that had been operating outside legal authority. Stand down. All teams stand down immediately. The order came simultaneously from Chinese, Russian, British, and American command centers as intelligence agencies realized their illegal coordination had been exposed to public scrutiny. International Court has issued emergency injunctions against all covert operations targeting Corleone Foundation assets. Came the announcement over multiple frequencies. All teams returned to base for legal review. Victor was monitoring tactical frequencies with amazement that suggested even he hadn't expected their desperate gambit to succeed. They're withdrawing. All of them. The legal exposure from continuing the operation outweighs their desire to eliminate us. But as relief flooded through their tiny safe house, as intelligence teams that had been preparing to kill them began retreating under legal pressure, Director Hepburn's voice came through their communication system with news that chilled everyone's blood. Mr. Corleone, Agent Wei, Mr. Kozlov, Director Hepburn announced. Congratulations on your legal victory. Unfortunately, it's also your death sentence. What do you mean? Ethan demanded. You've just exposed illegal cooperation between intelligence agencies worldwide. The people responsible for those operations can't allow you to survive as witnesses to their crimes. Director Hepburn explained with clinical precision. Official government assets are withdrawing, but private contractors with no legal constraints are being activated to complete the mission. The weight of their victory transforming into an even deadlier threat crashed over them like ice water. How many? Ling asked. Enough, Director Hepburn replied. Mr. Corleone, your independence from government control means you're no longer protected by international law governing treatment of intelligence assets. You're now classified as terrorists who've stolen classified information, and private military contractors have authorization to use any means necessary to eliminate the threat you represent. As the sound of approaching helicopters filled the Montana air, as private military forces converged on their location with equipment and authorization that made government tactical teams look restrained, Ling realized their greatest enemy wasn't foreign intelligence services or criminal organizations. Their greatest enemy was the intelligence establishment itself, which would rather start a private war than allow witnesses to expose the illegal cooperation that kept their operations functioning. Ethan, Ling said quietly, taking his hand while Emma played between them. If we don't survive this. We're surviving this, Ethan interrupted fiercely. All of us. Together. Whatever it takes. But as private military contractors surrounded their location with overwhelming force and unlimited authorization to use lethal violence, as the people they loved faced elimination by forces that operated outside any legal constraint, Ethan made the choice that would either save them all or damn him beyond redemption. Victor, activate the Kozlov protocols, Ethan ordered. All of them. Everything you've held in reserve for 20 years. Victor stared at him. Ethan, those protocols will start a war. Not just between us and intelligence agencies, but between the criminal organizations that depend on my networks and the governments that have been tolerating their operations. Then we start a war, Ethan replied with absolute conviction. Because some things are worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. As Victor began activating criminal networks that would either destroy the intelligence establishment or consume everyone in the crossfire, as Ling prepared for a battle that would determine whether love could survive the combined opposition of every intelligence service in the world, they realized their darkest hour was about to become the moment when they discovered what they were truly capable of when the people they loved faced extinction. The war that erupted across 6 continents lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. But it was long enough to reshape the balance of power between intelligence agencies and the criminal networks they'd been secretly cooperating with for decades. Viktor Kozlov's activation of criminal organization protocols didn't just target the private military contractors surrounding their Montana safe house. It simultaneously triggered operations against intelligence assets worldwide, exposing corruption, eliminating compromised agents, and severing cooperation agreements that had taken decades to establish. Beijing station compromised, Victor reported, monitoring global operations from equipment that had transformed their safe house into a command center for international criminal warfare. Moscow assets eliminated. London networks disabled. Washington operations terminated. But it wasn't criminal organizations that saved Ethan, Ling, and Emma from the private military assault that should have killed them. It was Director Katharine Hepburn, who arrived with federal marshals and congressional oversight authority that superseded all intelligence agency operations. "Stand down," Director Hepburn commanded, her voice carrying authority that made private military contractors lower their weapons despite having authorization to kill everyone in the building. This facility is now under congressional protection, pending investigation of intelligence agency violations of federal law. Ethan stared at the woman who'd betrayed their location to intelligence agencies worldwide, trying to understand why she was now protecting them from the forces she'd unleashed. "Director Hepburn," Ethan said warily, 12 hours ago, you were broadcasting our conversations to every intelligence service on the planet. 12 hours ago, I was conducting an authorized intelligence operation," Director Hepburn replied, settling into their safe house with the calm authority of someone who controlled outcomes rather than reacting to them. "Now I'm conducting damage control for intelligence agencies that violated federal law by coordinating assassination operations against American citizens." She showed them congressional authorizations that made everyone's situation suddenly, impossibly complex. "The evidence you broadcast triggered emergency congressional oversight of intelligence operations," Director Hepburn explained. 17 intelligence agencies are now under investigation for illegal cooperation in operations that violated constitutional protections for American citizens. Ling was staring at documents that suggested their desperate broadcast had accomplished more than just exposing criminal cooperation. It had triggered systematic reform of intelligence operations worldwide. "Congress is shutting down illegal intelligence cooperation?" Ling asked. "Congress is asserting constitutional authority over intelligence operations that have been conducted without proper oversight for 75 years, Director Hepburn confirmed. "And they're using the Corleone Foundation as the model for how private intelligence assets should operate." The revelation hit everyone like lightning. They hadn't just survived intelligence agency assassination attempts. They'd accidentally triggered governmental reform that would transform how intelligence operations were conducted globally. "The Corleone Foundation is being legitimized?" Ethan asked. "The Corleone Foundation is being federally chartered as an independent oversight organization with authority to investigate intelligence agency violations of constitutional law," Director Hepburn replied, showing them documents that would either restore their freedom or trap them in new forms of government service. Victor was reviewing agreements that would transform his criminal organization from an illegal network into a legitimate intelligence asset serving congressional oversight rather than agency objectives. "This is either the best possible outcome," Victor said slowly, "or the most sophisticated manipulation any of us have ever encountered." Before anyone could respond, Emma looked up from toys that had kept her occupied during international criminal warfare and asked the question that cut through all complexity. "Does this mean we get to go home now?" The silence that followed carried recognition that home wasn't a place any of them could return to. Too much had changed, too many secrets had been exposed, too many enemies had been made for simple family life to ever be possible again. "Emma," Ling said gently, "we're going to build a new home. All of us together. With Daddy Ethan and Uncle Victor and Aunt Catherine?" Emma asked, unconsciously creating the family structure that would define their future. "With everyone who chooses to help us protect families like ours from people who try to use love as a weapon," Ethan confirmed. Director Hepburn was reviewing operational files that would determine whether their new organization served justice or became another tool for government manipulation. "The congressional charter comes with conditions," Director Hepburn announced. "Complete transparency in operations, regular oversight reviews, and absolute prohibition against activities that violate constitutional rights." "And if we refuse the charter?" Ling asked. "Then you remain fugitives from intelligence agencies that will eventually find ways to eliminate you despite congressional protection," Director Hepburn replied honestly. The choice was between legitimate authority with government oversight or continued independence with the constant threat of assassination by intelligence services that operated outside legal constraint. But as they considered options that would determine their future, Victor's monitoring equipment activated with an emergency transmission that changed everything. "This is Agent Sarah Chun, FBI Organized Crime Task Force, requesting immediate assistance for civilian protection operation." Everyone stared at the communication device, because Sarah Chun was supposed to be Ling Wei, Chinese intelligence operative, not an FBI agent conducting civilian protection operations. "Agent Chun," Director Hepburn responded, "report your operational status." "Director Hepburn, I'm coordinating protection for 12 families whose children have been targeted by intelligence agencies for elimination as potential witnesses to the Corleone Foundation revelations," came the reply that made Emma clap her hands with excitement. "More kids like me," Emma announced with delight. But Victor was studying intelligence reports that revealed the scope of retaliation operations that were targeting anyone connected to their independence declaration. "It's not just 12 families," Victor said grimly. "Intelligence agencies worldwide are eliminating assets, witnesses, and family members who might be inspired by our example. Hundreds of people are being murdered to prevent the spread of independence movements." The weight of responsibility for lives being lost because of their choices crashed over them like a physical blow. Their declaration of independence hadn't just freed themselves. It had triggered systematic elimination of people whose only crime was being connected to private intelligence networks. "We have to stop it," Ling said immediately. "Every family being targeted, every witness being eliminated. We're responsible for their safety now." "Agent Chen is coordinating protection operations," Director Hepburn confirmed. "But she needs resources, authority, and operational support that only the Corleone Foundation can provide." Ethan looked around their Montana safe house, seeing the command center that Victor had built, the federal authority that Director Hepburn represented, and the family that he'd chosen over government loyalty. "We accept the congressional charter," Ethan announced. "But with modifications." "What modifications?" Director Hepburn asked. "The Corleone Foundation operates as an independent organization that accepts congressional oversight while maintaining operational autonomy," Ethan replied. "We serve constitutional principles, not government objectives. We protect families, not political interests. And we answer to the people whose lives depend on our choices, not to agencies that see human rights as obstacles to operational effectiveness." Director Hepburn was quiet for a moment before responding. "Mr. Corleone, what you're proposing is unprecedented. A private intelligence organization with federal authority, but independent operation, is exactly what the founders intended when they designed constitutional protections against government overreach," Victor interrupted, showing them historical documents that supported Ethan's proposal. "The Corleone Foundation becomes a constitutional safeguard," Ling realized. "An organization with the resources to protect people from intelligence agencies that violate federal law." Emma was listening to adult conversations with the serious expression of a child who understood that important decisions were being made about her future. "Will we be safe?" Emma asked Ethan directly. "Emma," Ethan said, kneeling beside the little girl who'd accidentally triggered international intelligence warfare, "we're going to make sure that every family like ours is safe. Forever. Promise?" "Promise," Ethan said, understanding that he'd just committed to a mission that would define the rest of their lives. As congressional authorization arrived for the Corleone Foundation's new status, as Agent Sarah Chin coordinated protection operations for families worldwide, as Victor transformed his criminal networks into humanitarian assets serving constitutional protection, they realized their love story was evolving into something unprecedented. A family that served justice instead of serving masters, that protected love instead of exploiting it, that chose principle over convenience regardless of what powerful forces demanded from them. Their turning point hadn't been about surviving intelligence agency assassination attempts. It had been about choosing to transform their survival into protection for everyone who needed the courage to choose love over loyalty to institutions that didn't deserve their service. 6 months later, the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council was unlike anything in the organization's history. Not because of the crisis being addressed, but because the people addressing it were a former billionaire, a former Chinese intelligence operative, a former international criminal, and a 6-year-old girl who'd accidentally triggered the largest intelligence reform in modern history. The Corleone Foundation for Constitutional Justice, Secretary General Maria Santos announced, has successfully protected 437 families from intelligence agency retaliation while documenting systematic violations of international law by government agencies in 23 countries. Ethan sat at the witness table wearing a simple business suit that somehow carried more authority than the designer clothes from his billionaire days, while Ling held Emma on her lap and Victor reviewed documentation that would either complete their victory or destroy them all. Mr. Corleone, Ambassador Chunwei addressed Ethan with the formal respect due to someone whose organization had reshaped international relations. Your foundation's activities have been characterized as both humanitarian protection and obstruction of legitimate intelligence operations. How do you respond to allegations that you're harboring criminals and terrorists? Ethan stood to address the Security Council, his voice carrying 6 months of accumulated authority and the absolute conviction of someone who'd chosen principle over convenience regardless of the personal cost. Ambassador Chun, the Corleone Foundation protects families from intelligence agencies that violate constitutional law, Ethan replied. If those agencies define constitutional protection as obstruction, then we're guilty as charged. He activated presentation equipment that showed evidence compiled over 6 months of operations that had exposed corruption reaching into the highest levels of government worldwide. 17 intelligence agencies have been documented coordinating assassination operations against civilians whose only crime was choosing independence from government control. 12 countries have been operating private military contractors to eliminate witnesses to intelligence agency violations of international law. The Security Council chamber fell silent as evidence streamed across monitors that documented systematic abuse of intelligence authorities spanning decades. The families we've protected include federal agents who discovered corruption in their own agencies, business owners whose companies were being used without their knowledge for intelligence operations, and children whose parents were murdered for refusing to cooperate with illegal activities. Ambassador Sarah Williams, representing the United States, stepped forward with documents that would either legitimize the Foundation's work or criminalize it under international law. Mr. Corleone, the United States government recognizes the constitutional validity of your organization's mission, Ambassador Williams announced, and we're prepared to offer formal international recognition of the Corleone Foundation as a legitimate oversight authority. With conditions, Ambassador Viktor Petrov added, representing Russia with obvious reluctance. Any organization claiming authority to investigate intelligence operations must accept oversight by the governments whose agencies they're investigating. Ling rose from her seat, still holding Emma, and addressed the Security Council with the calm authority of someone who'd learned to speak truth to power regardless of personal consequences. Ambassador Petrov, the purpose of constitutional protection is to provide safeguards against government overreach, Ling said clearly. Requiring government oversight of constitutional protections would eliminate the independence necessary for those protections to function. She gestured toward documentation that revealed the scope of intelligence cooperation that had violated international law. The evidence shows that government agencies worldwide have been coordinating operations that violate the sovereignty and constitutional rights of multiple nations. Independent oversight isn't just necessary, it's the only way to prevent future violations. Emma looked around the Security Council chamber with wide-eyed wonder, then asked the question that cut through all diplomatic complexity. Why don't the bad people just promise to stop being bad? The laughter that followed carried recognition that a 6-year-old had identified the fundamental problem with trusting promises from institutions that had systematically violated those promises for decades. Because, sweetheart, Victor said gently, some people only keep their promises when they know someone is watching to make sure they do. Before the Security Council could respond, alarms throughout the United Nations building activated with sounds that indicated immediate security threats. Multiple breach points, coordinated assault, unknown attackers with military-grade equipment. Came the announcement over security channels. All personnel to secure positions immediately. But the tactical teams that poured into the Security Council chamber weren't there to attack. They were there to surrender. Agent Rodriguez, Central Intelligence Agency, the team leader announced, removing her weapon and placing it on the floor. We're here to provide testimony about illegal operations that the Corleone Foundation has been investigating. Behind her, Agents from 12 different intelligence services entered with evidence that would either complete the Foundation's mission or reveal it as the most sophisticated intelligence operation in history. Director Katharine Hepburn ordered us to provide complete documentation of constitutional violations to prevent congressional investigation from exposing classified operations that serve legitimate national security purposes, Agent Rodriguez explained. Victor was reviewing the evidence with professional appreciation. Impressive. They're offering to expose their own illegal operations to prevent investigation of their legitimate ones. What's the difference? Emma asked with the directness that adults had learned to respect. The illegal operations violated people's rights, Ling explained gently. The legitimate operations protected people's safety. Then why didn't they just do the good ones and not do the bad ones? Emma asked, unconsciously articulating the principle that would guide international intelligence reform for decades. Agent Rodriguez smiled at Emma before addressing the Security Council. Because, until the Corleone Foundation demonstrated that independent oversight was possible, intelligence agencies operated under the assumption that protecting national security required violating individual rights. And now, Secretary General Santos asked, now we know that constitutional protection and national security can coexist if intelligence operations accept oversight by organizations that serve principles instead of serving governments, Agent Rodriguez replied. The evidence that intelligence agencies provided was staggering in scope. Decades of constitutional violations, thousands of families harmed by illegal operations, and systematic abuse of authority that had been justified as necessary for national security. But more importantly, it included comprehensive reform proposals that would transform intelligence operations worldwide while maintaining effective protection against legitimate threats. The Intelligence Reform Treaty, Secretary General Santos announced, establishing international protocols for constitutional oversight of intelligence operations, is now ready for Security Council vote. The vote was unanimous, not because every government supported constitutional oversight, but because the evidence of abuse was so overwhelming that opposition would have been politically impossible. The Corleone Foundation for Constitutional Justice is hereby recognized as an international oversight authority with jurisdiction to investigate intelligence agency violations of constitutional law, Secretary General Santos declared. As delegates approved reforms that would protect families worldwide from intelligence agency overreach, as evidence of systematic abuse was formally acknowledged by international law, as the Foundation's work was legitimized by every major government, Emma clapped her hands with delight. Does this mean we won? Emma asked. This means we get to keep protecting families like ours, Ethan replied, understanding that their victory wasn't an ending but a beginning. But as celebrations began, as international recognition legitimized their work, as reform treaties were signed that would transform intelligence operations for generations, Victor's monitoring equipment activated with a priority transmission that reminded everyone why their work would never truly be finished. Corleone Foundation, this is Agent Maria Santos, requesting immediate protection assistance for family under threat from intelligence retaliation in Buenos Aires. Ling activated communication protocols that connected them to field operations spanning 6 continents. Agent Santos, protection teams are en route. Estimated arrival 12 minutes. Emma was watching her parents coordinate international protection operations with the satisfied expression of a child who understood that her family was doing important work. Are we going to help them? Emma asked. We're going to help everyone, Ethan confirmed, realizing that their love story had become something unprecedented. A family whose commitment to each other had transformed into commitment to protecting every family that faced similar threats. As the United Nations session concluded, as international recognition provided resources and authority for their work, as they prepared to leave New York for their next mission protecting families from intelligence agency overreach, Ethan, Ling, Victor, and Emma understood something about love that no amount of wealth or power could have taught them. The most dangerous thing you can do is fall in love with someone society says you shouldn't. And sometimes, that dangerous love becomes the foundation for changing the world. 5 years later, the Corleone Foundation headquarters in Geneva looked like a cross between a family home and an international command center, which was exactly what it had become, a place where love and justice converged to protect families that governments had failed to serve. Mama, tell me the story about how you and Daddy met, 11-year-old Emma requested. settling into the living area where family time seamlessly blended with coordinating humanitarian operations that spanned every continent. Again, Ling asked with amusement, noting how Emma never tired of hearing the story that had accidentally triggered the largest intelligence reform in modern history. "It's the best story," Emma insisted, curling up beside Ling while Ethan reviewed operational reports that documented lives saved and families protected since their foundation had been legitimized by international law. "Once upon a time," Ling began, looking at Ethan with eyes that still held the wonder of finding love in the most unlikely circumstances, "there was a billionaire who thought he understood what success meant, and a secret agent who thought she understood what duty required. And they were both wrong," Emma added with delight, having internalized the moral lessons of her parents' journey from deception to truth. "They were both learning," Victor corrected gently from across the room, where he was coordinating protective services for families in 17 countries while somehow maintaining the patience necessary for frequent storytelling. "Learning that real success means protecting people instead of accumulating wealth, and that real duty means serving justice instead of serving governments." Emma nodded with the serious expression of a child who'd grown up understanding that important work required sacrifice, but that sacrifice shared with people you loved became something beautiful instead of burdensome. "Tell the part about the hospital," Emma requested, unconsciously focusing on the moment when her family had been forged through crisis and revelation. "In the hospital," Ethan continued, "we learned that love isn't about finding someone who fits into your existing life. It's about building a new life together that serves something bigger than yourselves." He gestured around their headquarters, where family photographs shared wall space with awards from international human rights organizations, where children's artwork hung beside operational maps that tracked humanitarian missions worldwide. And Uncle Victor learned that criminal organizations could become justice organizations if they were guided by people who chose protection over profit, Ling added, noting how Victor had transformed his international networks from money laundering into family protection services. "What about all the other families?" Emma asked, referring to the hundreds of people whose lives had been saved by their foundation's work. Victor activated displays that showed current operations. Families being relocated from intelligence agency retaliation, children being protected from recruitment by criminal organizations, parents being provided resources to resist government coercion. 743 families protected this year. Victor reported with satisfaction that went beyond professional success into personal fulfillment. 12 intelligence agencies reformed their operational protocols to comply with constitutional oversight. 6 countries have established independent oversight authorities modeled on our organization. Emma was studying world maps that showed locations where the foundation operated, noting how their work had spread from protecting individual families to reforming entire systems that had been abusing government authority. "Are all the bad people stopped now?" Emma asked with the directness that continued to cut through diplomatic complexity. "Some of them," Ethan replied honestly. "But new bad people appear regularly, which is why our work continues. But now we know how to stop them," Ling added, "and we have friends all over the world who help us protect families like ours." Before Emma could ask more questions, their communication system activated with a priority transmission that would test their reformed system of international cooperation. "Corleone Foundation, this is Director Sarah Chun, FBI Constitutional Oversight Division. We have a situation requiring immediate coordination." Ethan activated video communication that connected them to the woman who'd helped coordinate their protection operations during the darkest period of intelligence agency retaliation. "Director Chun," Ling responded, "report your status." "We've identified a coordinated operation involving intelligence agencies from 4 countries targeting families of government whistleblowers," Director Chun announced, showing them evidence that suggested some agencies had learned to circumvent constitutional oversight through international cooperation. "How many families?" Victor asked, already beginning logistical preparation for protection operations. 17 families across 6 countries, Director Chun replied. "Children, parents, extended family members, all targeted for elimination to discourage future whistleblowing about government corruption." Emma was listening to adult conversations with the engaged attention of a child who understood that family discussions often involved saving people's lives. "We'll help them," Emma said simply, voicing the family consensus before any formal decision was required. "All of them," Ethan confirmed, understanding that their daughter had inherited the values that had guided their transformation from victims to protectors. Within hours, the Corleone Foundation activated protection networks that demonstrated how dramatically international cooperation had evolved since their independence declaration had triggered reform 5 years earlier. Government agencies that had once coordinated assassination attempts now coordinated protection services. Criminal networks that had once exploited families now provided security and relocation assistance. Intelligence services that had once violated constitutional rights now served as enforcement mechanisms for constitutional protection. Operation Complete, Victor reported after coordinating the largest family protection mission in the Foundation's history. 17 families extracted to secure locations, for intelligence agency officials arrested for constitutional violations, international oversight committees activated to investigate systematic abuse. Emma was coloring pictures that would be sent to the children they'd helped relocate, artwork that served as reminders that someone cared about their safety and wanted them to feel welcomed in their new homes. "The children we helped," Emma said, "will they get to have families like us? They'll get to have families that love them and protect them and help them build lives that serve something good," Ling replied, understanding that their daughter was processing the concept of chosen family that had defined their own journey. "Like we chose each other," Emma said with satisfaction. "Exactly like we chose each other," Ethan confirmed, pulling his daughter into his lap while reviewing reports that documented the systemic changes their love story had accidentally triggered. Constitutional oversight of intelligence operations had become standard practice in 34 countries. International cooperation protocols now included mandatory protection for families affected by government operations. Reform movements modeled on the Corleone Foundation had established independent oversight authorities that served constitutional principles rather than government convenience. "Any regrets?" Ling asked Ethan, echoing the question that had defined their relationship since learning their initial meeting had been part of an intelligence operation. Ethan considered the question seriously, thinking about the billionaire lifestyle he'd abandoned, the simple family life that had been impossible once they'd become targets for international intelligence services, the comfortable anonymity they'd traded for public responsibility that would continue for the rest of their lives. "None," Ethan said firmly, understanding that their love had become something more valuable than personal happiness. It had become a model for how families could choose justice over convenience, principle over safety, truth over comfortable lies. "Me neither," Ling agreed, noting how their relationship had survived deception, international espionage, and intelligence agency assassination attempts to become something stronger than anything she'd imagined possible during her years as a government operative. "What about you, Uncle Victor?" Emma asked, including their chosen family member in conversations that shaped their understanding of what they'd built together. Victor smiled with contentment that had nothing to do with the wealth and power he'd once pursued through criminal enterprises. "Emma, I regret nothing about choosing family over profit, protection over exploitation, justice over convenience." As evening settled over Geneva, as the Corleone Foundation headquarters transitioned from International Command Center to family home, as Emma prepared for bed in a world made safer by her parents' commitment to protecting other families, they understood something about love that would guide them for the rest of their lives. Love wasn't just about finding happiness for yourself. It was about building happiness that could be shared with everyone who needed the courage to choose justice over convenience, principle over safety, family over institutions that demanded loyalty without deserving trust. Their love story had begun with deception, federal manipulation, and the threat of criminal retaliation. It had become a foundation for transforming international relations, protecting constitutional rights, and ensuring that families worldwide had resources to resist government overreach. "Ethan Corleone," Ling said quietly as they watched their daughter sleep surrounded by artwork from children they'd helped protect. "What did our story teach you about love?" "It taught me that real love isn't about finding someone perfect," Ethan replied. "It's about choosing to build something perfect together, even when building it requires more courage than you knew you possessed." "And what did it teach you about family?" "That family isn't just the people you're born with or the people you marry," Ethan said, looking around their home that served as headquarters for protecting families worldwide. "Family is everyone who chooses to help you serve something bigger than personal happiness." As they prepared for another day of protecting families from forces that would exploit love instead of honoring it, as they considered the requests for assistance that arrived daily from people who needed courage to choose justice over convenience, as they held each other close while planning operations that would reshape international law and constitutional protection. Ethan and Ling understood the final lesson their journey had taught them. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fall in love with someone society says you shouldn't. And sometimes that dangerous love becomes the foundation for changing society itself. I am literally sobbing happy tears right now. Ethan, Ling, Victor, and Emma didn't just get their happily ever after. They created a legacy that protects families worldwide and transformed international intelligence operations. From a billionaire falling for his employee to building a foundation that serves constitutional justice. This is the most incredible love story of transformation I've ever experienced. What did this beautiful journey teach you about love, courage, and the power of choosing justice over convenience? About how personal happiness becomes more meaningful when it's shared with everyone who needs the courage to fight for what's right. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. I read every single one, and I treasure hearing how these stories touch your heart. And if this incredible story moved you as much as it moved me, you absolutely must hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We have so many more amazing stories about love conquering impossible odds, about people choosing principle over comfort, and about families that transform personal suffering into protection for others. Thank you for joining Ethan, Ling, Victor, and Emma on this incredible adventure. Sometimes love really does change the world. One family at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. See you in the next story, beautiful souls.